I'm Meredith Clark with Region 10 ESC. Welcome to this video where you will learn the purpose of world language education and the definition of communication. Here is my email address. If you have any questions after the video, feel free to contact me. And let's again ground ourselves in the purpose for this video. You're going to be smarter after you watch this video. Here's how. You're going to be able to define the purpose of a world language education and also the definition of communication, and you'll be able to articulate why knowing all this stuff is really important. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at that purpose. The purpose of a world language education is clearly stated in the Lotte Teaks. In section 2, it says, communication is the overarching goal of world language instruction. Now, communication and practicing language parts are two different things. So for us to implement our world languages curriculum successfully and have students perform the Teaks successfully, we have to make sure that they're communicating, not just practicing language parts. And we'll dive into that in just a second. Okay, so what is the definition of communication? I need to know what that is. And how is that different from practicing language parts? Okay, so according to Dr. Bill Van Patten, communication is the expression, interpretation, and sometimes negotiation of meaning within a given context. It is also purposeful. All right, so here's what this means. Expression is when language comes out of the student, okay? It's either spoken, written, or it is signed in the case of American Sign Language, okay? In order for communication to happen, we need both expression and interpretation to be present. Interpretation is when we hear or read or view in the case of American Sign Language, and we understand what is happening. So if I have a student sitting here and the instructions are, say what you did last weekend, and this student says what they did last weekend, and this student is just sitting there like a knot on the log, not understanding anything, we don't have communication. There's expression, but not interpretation. Interpretation would be something like, instead of tell your partner what you did last weekend, it would be ask and answer questions about what you all did this past weekend. This student says what they did. Oh, I went to see a soccer game. Oh, really? What game did you see? What time was it? Where was it? Who did you go with? Right? And that is communication, okay? Negotiation of meaning is when somebody doesn't understand. So if I say, I went to see a soccer game last week, and this student says, soccer? Then it's like, oh, it's a game with a ball, you kick it. Oh, soccer, okay. That is negotiation of meaning. So that happens in communication. If we see students moving their mouths and they're not asking for clarification, or if they're reading or listening and they're not trying to infer the meaning of new words and figure out things through context clues, they're not negotiating meaning, and that's not literacy, that's not communication, okay? Context means the situation that we are talking about. Here is not a context: a word search, vocabulary matching, pulling sentences out of the hat and saying them, or changing the verbs. That's not a real context for communication. Contexts are what it's what people talk about, right? So my family, my school, my job, my activities, what it means to be a good citizen, how we feel nostalgic about our past. All of those are contexts that give and set up a real purpose for communicating, which is to either learn information about ourselves and others, or learn information about the world in which we live, okay? So teachers and administrators, we all need to know the definition of communication, because if we look at our curriculum unit and we try to teach it as language parts instead of full communication, we won't have successful implementation of the curriculum, and that is the goal. Okay, so how do we teach and measure communication? The Teaks are wonderful. They've already set up a pathway. we know that by the end of levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, students are supposed to reach a specified proficiency level. Now, American Sign Language and Latin, your proficiency levels are slightly different for your course levels, but you can find those in your TEKS. Okay, so by the end of every unit, I need to see if kids can communicate at that proficiency level. And how do I know they can communicate at the specified proficiency level? Well, they can do the knowledge and skills and the student expectations in the TEKS. Okay, so it's pretty simple, right? I just got to teach kids to do those student expectations. All right, so why do we need to know this? Okay, so as I mentioned before, if you look at your World Languages curriculum unit and you try to teach it like language parts, for example, let's look at this interpersonal summative task. Kids are supposed to ask and answer questions about who they are and what they like to do. If the teacher looks at that and says, okay, I got it, I'm going to teach them vocabulary list about personalities and physical characteristics and hobbies. They're going to quiz each other on flashcards, and that's what we're going to do for, like, play games with the vocabulary during the unit. Okay, playing games with the vocabulary is not building kids to ask and answer questions. Okay, let's look at Teacher B. Teacher B looks at this curriculum framework and looks at that summative interpersonal task. And Teacher B models with the students in the target language how to ask and answer questions about who they are and what they do for fun. She supports her target language discourse with visuals, gestures, and also slows the rate of her speech. Students are then, by modeling and participating in the target language with the teacher, able to ask and answer questions to each other about who they are and what they do. Okay, and then they add on more questions to the conversation. And so by the end of the units, the kids can have a very well-rounded conversation about who they are and what they do, asking and answering questions. That is going to have a successful curriculum implementation, Teacher B. Okay, all right, as we know, this is very necessary to have effective schools, right? We've got to have high-quality instructional materials and assessments. And the World Language Curriculum Framework sets us up just for that. We also know that for teachers to be successful in T-TESS, they have got to have Dimension 1 for planning down. They've got to have a guaranteed and viable pathway to get kids to perform the TEKS. And if that planning piece is off, right, if we look at that curriculum document and we still don't plan for instruction well, then the whole rest of the teaching cycle falls apart and we won't hit the desired results of having the students perform the SEs and the TEKS and communicate in the target language. Okay, just really quickly, what are the success criteria for implementing curriculum? Well, y'all know what I'm going to say. Everybody needs to know the purpose of a world language education is to communicate. It's not to practice language parts. And communication occurs when kids are expressing, interpreting, negotiating meaning, okay, all while talking about real life contexts for a purpose, which is to learn about the world and each other. That's what we all need to know. So what do we need to do? Okay, we need to ensure that kids are communicating in class and really be reflective practitioners. After teachers plan lessons or before, as they're planning, they should ask themselves, are we achieving communication here? I got this definition. I know it needs to be expression, interpretation, sometimes negotiation of meaning within a given context for a specific purpose. And a teacher can very quickly, run their lesson or their instruction through that definition to see if kids are communicating. So we need to build that practice. And administrators, you need to be able to walk into the classroom and see whether kids are actually communicating or just practicing language parts. And if they are practicing language parts, let's get the teacher the support that we need so that they can help their students communicate in the target language. Okay? Region 10 is always here to help. All right, please check out our homepage for World Languages. You can find upcoming trainings. You can contact us and request trainings as well. All right. And I just appreciate your time today. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this video. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And I know that if we work together, we can improve our world language programs, improve language outcomes for students, and just get ready for a robust 21st century economy and just make people smarter, right? People who speak multiple languages perform better in every single academic content, right? So let's do it. Let's make this state multilingual, and we can do it if we work together. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.